I think we're there.
I think we are, yeah.
Well, welcome everybody to the Transportation Advisory Committee meeting for February 3rd. So I'll call the meeting to order. And at this point, do we need to do introductions? Anybody new? I don't believe so.
Do we
Joe,
have members of the public attending?
we do on the phone line, but I think it's listen only. Is that right, Joe?
Yeah.
Correct. Listen only.
Do you think they might like to know who we are, though?
Yeah, sure. I was going to ask how Joe, do you do a roll call based off of who's in the Teams meeting?
We do it when we approve the minutes.
Okay.
So we'll cover all the members that are present.
I think we have time to do a quick intro just for the benefit of any visitors that we might have.
Yeah, I'm Ruth Harshfield. I'm the chair of the Transportation Advisory Committee. So I don't know.
Well, let me just read from my list here.
Okay.
So Corinne, you're next.
Hi, I'm Karina Rendies, Tigard resident, Ttac member.
And then Carl.
Carl Fisher, North Tigard resident.
And my name is Dave Roth. I'm Tigard's senior transportation planner. And then we have David Burke.
Hi, everybody. I'm David Burke. I'm a Ttac member as of just joined last month.
Okay, Alan.
Hi, Alan Eckert, close to downtown resident in Tigard here. And I'm
George
for 2 years. Hi there, I'm George Brandt, Tigard member, live in Tigard, or Ttac member, and live in Tigard.
Okay, Holly. And you're on mute, Holly, if you're speaking. I'll go ahead and introduce her. Holly Kunst, Ttac member. And then Joe Patton.
Sorry. I'm the senior administrative specialist for the city of Tigard. I staff the Ttac meetings.
And I see, Holly, you're unmuted if you want to introduce yourself.
Sure. So I'm Holly. This is my second year on Ttac, and I've been in Tigard almost 5 years now.
All right. Councillor Goodhouse.
Councillor John Goodhouse, Tigard resident for my whole life.
All right. And then we have Michael Hendrickson.
I'm Michael Hendrickson, and this is my second Ttac meeting. I'm new to the Ttac.
Okay. Richard Keast.
Hi, I'm East Butte resident here in Tigard, East Butte neighborhood, and I'm the vice chair of Ttac. I've been in Tigard for about 7 years now.
All right. And then we have Serge Killingsworth.
I'm Serge Killingsworth. I'm an alternate member, non-voting, resident in the Darrydale area in Tigard.
Okay. And then I've got two other staff members I'd like to introduce. Skylar first.
Hi, everyone. I'm Skylar Warren, Senior Planner with the City of Tigard's Community Development Department.
And then Tegan Enlow.
Hi, everyone. This is Tegan Enlow. I'm a Senior Transportation Engineer in the Public Works Engineering Department.
All right, that's everyone I have on my list. Did I miss anyone? Okay, I think we're good to move on, Ruth.
Okay, so everyone have an opportunity to look at the minutes from our January meeting, January 6th meeting. Do I have any comments, questions, concerns?
It looked good to me. This is George.
All righty.
This is Crane. I move we adopt the minutes as prepared.
This
This
is
is
David. I'll
Richard.
second that
Second.
motion.
Sorry, who was that?
It was probably a couple of us.
Yeah, I think it was a couple of us, so
This is- but-
resoundingly seconded.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. So, all in favor, I guess? Do we need to go do a roll call again or just see if anybody's opposed?
I think we can just voice vote if everybody says they
Okay.
approve, and then we'll ask if anybody disapproves or wants to abstain, and we can go from there.
Okay, everybody who approves of the minutes, say aye.
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 Anyone disapprove? Or anyone abstain? Okay, minutes have been accepted. Thank you. So we're going to talk about today on the agenda. We've updated it a bit. Dave and I met and chatted, and we're going to have public comment, but also member comment, items that maybe are not on the agenda that we would like to get to today, so that we know we have enough time further in the agenda to cover any member concerns. So, Dave, do you want to talk about the public comment that we received?
Yeah, why don't we'll start with the public comment, and then when we wrap that up, as Ruth said, I think we're going to try something a little bit different here to make sure that we provide enough time if individual Ttac members have items that they want to share and discuss as a group. We'll poll the group for any items, and then we will add those to the end of the agenda. So let's go ahead and we'll start with the public comment. I thought I would try to share my screen here just so we can look at the images that were submitted. And I guess I'll ask, did everyone have a chance to read the email that was shared with you today?
Yes.
I did.
Yep.
Yeah, I did.
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
So this is submitted by Shelley Chase, who lives on Fern Street. And Shelley, and from what I understand, several of her neighbors have provided some comment along the lines of what you see here. So there are concerns around traffic safety, speeds of vehicles traveling on Fern Street, and volume of vehicles on Fern Street. So if it's helpful, I can share. Can you see my screen now?
Yeah, we can.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. Oh, cool. I'm using two computers right now, and I can actually see what I'm sharing, which is good.
Dave, it's kind of a small picture. Would you like me to share it for you?
I think I can make it bigger here. Hold on. There we go. Is that any better?
A little, but it doesn't fill up the whole screen.
Okay. Let me try that. I don't know if that's any better. I mean, I think the committee has the images.
Yeah, I think that'll work.
But you can see it's, Fern Street is, and Tegan, you're going to have to help me here. I believe it's a neighborhood classification street. And as you can see, it's not brought up to, our current urban standards, which would have, 2 travel lanes with sidewalks and other infrastructure on there. It's not unlike some other streets, that have not been brought up to urban standards within Tigard. So I think, for those who've had a chance to read the email, I think maybe we'll open it up for any questions or discussion that you might want to have.
Alan here, I read through that and I looked on the on maps here, and I don't want to comment too much on the actual substance of this, but I think that it would be a good example to bring to the table when we're exploring the potential changes of speed limit down to 20 miles an hour on select streets to see if the requirements from the particular stretch meet the priorities to for those changes on the list that's being examined now.
That's a great suggestion. Tegan, do you want to respond to that at all?
Yeah, so that is a really good idea. Well, I'll back up a little bit. So I did receive 3, I believe, emails in the last 2 weeks from members who live on Fern requesting similar things to the public comment that we received from Shelley. After those conversations, I took a look at the data that's out there, and I believe it's summarized in the public comment that was submitted. But I had a conversation with Joe, our assistant city engineer, and we looked at it, and so the posted speed out there is currently 25. 85% of drivers are going at or below 24 miles per hour. And the, hold on, let me open it really quick. The weekday ADT, so the number of people who drive over it on a weekday in 2019 was 740 cars, and on a weekend it was 527. So it's relatively low volume compared to other facilities in Tigard. And it currently has speed humps on it. So it's already got some traffic calming out there. So the recommendation that we had made from a staffing standpoint and what was confirmed in conversations with our assistant city engineer is that we wouldn't recommend any additional traffic calming features out there currently. However, I did have some conversations because we are working on the 20-mile-per-hour program. I'm currently drafting the ordinance right now that's supposed to go to council later this month for consideration, which, if approved, would allow us to implement the 20-mile-per-hour zones on a select subset of streets within Tigard. And I did confirm that Fern is one of the streets that would be eligible for 20. And I have updated our ordinance presentation for council to include Fern as one of the first batches of locations that would get the 20 mile per hour if approved. So that is definitely something that we're looking at. The other thing we're considering is potentially putting some markings out there, some sharrows to indicate that it's a shared facility where you'll have cyclists and pedestrians in lane. In order to put those down, I believe we have to do it as part of our striping contract that would happen later this summer because we don't have the equipment in-house to be able to apply those, but I am needing to coordinate with our operations team to confirm that and then just get the official approval from all the members that be internally if they would be comfortable with sharrows. So that's kind of the status of where we're at right now.
Thanks, Tegan. I see Karine and then George and then Michael.
Thanks, Dave. So I had a couple of questions for staff. To start with, I was wondering if we had any crash data for this street, and if so, did it, rise to a standard threshold for concern or action? And the other question I wanted to ask initially was whether the city has any standards or thresholds about closing off a street. Dave, you mentioned that this is classified as a neighborhood street. And so I'm not sure, is that like the same thing as it's intended to be local access only? Or is that maybe like a step above where it actually is intended for people to be able to pass through the neighborhood? Because it seems like there's a development to the north and access via 138th, because Walnut Lane doesn't go through, and maybe some of the traffic, although it's a low volume street, maybe some of the traffic is it's acting as a through street for some people. And I don't know if we have any standards about, if it's designated a certain way, we do intend for it to function as a through street, or is it do we know if it's serving that kind of function? And if it's not, and it's not intended to, could there be a remedy for that?
So let me start with the second question first, and then I might hand it back over to Tegan for the crash data question. So I believe this is a neighborhood class street, which is on the functional class hierarchy. It's definitely above a local street, and it does provide an important route through the network. So based off of current policy, set within our transportation system plan, this would not, this is not a street that we would cut off through diversion or other means. And in fact, we would likely not even do that on a local street. We have a lot of connectivity issues within Tigard, and typically we're trying to create more connectivity within the city and not less. And so highly unlikely that you would see diversion on here, but some of the tools that Tegan mentioned can help address some of the concerns that were raised. So start with that. And then I think I'd turn it over, Tegan, if you're still here, and I don't know if you had a chance to look at the crash data for this road or not.
Yeah, I was just opening back up the records really quick. There's only one crash recorded in our data set right now, which I believe is updated based on the most recent data that ODOT puts out. I know they release a new batch of data each year, and so I think we have whatever is like currently available from them. And it's showing there was one crash at the intersection of Fern and Ascension in 2017, and it was a property damage only, which means that the record doesn't show any injuries were sustained. And it was at the intersection. It doesn't have a whole lot of information about what caused the crash because it says it was not investigated by police, so it was a self-reported collision through the DMV. So there's not any crashes on the portion of Fern between Ascension and 135th, other than the one that was recorded at the intersection with Ascension. So that, wouldn't in itself indicate that there's a documented issue from recorded crash data.
Thank you, Tegan.
Thanks, Tegan. And so we have George, and then Michael, and then Richard up next.
Oh, hey, this is George. Just curious, is this a street that could be put on the small projects list for something maybe simple as grading the shoulder on one or both sides, or where there's room, and putting down bark or gravel to help with some of the narrowness? Because it sounds like the issue isn't necessarily the speed of the vehicles, but it's the conflict between pedestrians. I just looked through the whole street view of the line along the whole street. In this particular section, there's only one little teeny spot where there's sidewalk, and then either sides of it becomes a more of a complete street. So that's my thought. If this might be a candidate for small projects, slightly grade the side, gravel or bark dust or something like that, just to help for walkers.
Yeah, that's a great question, George. And I think it's something that we can look at. I suspect that just looking at images of the roadway and street view previously, I think we could run into some drainage and tree obstructions that could make that challenging. But I think that is something we can look at and kind of get a ballpark of what it might cost to, add a shoulder or something like through here.
Could I interject a question related to that? Would that one unincorporated section also cause some potential issues? There's like one lot that's listed as unincorporated.
It could. there's always complicating factors, and if there's an unincorporated section, yeah, just add that to the list of complications.
The other thing we need to be aware of is that if we make upgrades, like for example, a bark path, I don't believe that would be ADA compliant. And when we put in infrastructure, we need to make sure that what we're putting in is ADA compliant. So I think that could potentially be an issue. The other thing, and I am planning to come back to you guys with this in the future, it's something I'm still working on, is that, you know, our staff resources and our budget available for improvements like this are limited. And so we have to look at the city as a whole to figure out where we're expending funds. And so right now I have a data set that I've queried for the entire city of Tigard that looks at what the issues are related to speeding out there, and kind of ranks them from highest to lowest in terms of how much above the posted speed people are going, what % above the posted speed. And then we look at things like, is it a safe routes to school route? Is it, you know, something else like that? And I do acknowledge that this is a little bit narrower, so that would be sort of a contributing factor we would look at. But, you know, when we put funds here, you know, or spend staff time on a location like this, then it means that there's another spot that's not being looked at. So it's sort of a trade-off.
Thanks, Tegan. So I have Michael and then Richard, I think, was up next.
So I guess my question is, in streets like this that, I mean, maybe are used as like pass-throughs, is there any data like as far as like police records, as far as people who have been ticketed on streets like this and others? Or do you guys have access to that? Because I'm just wondering, like, as enforcement of the speed, how does that play into the?
So it is not illegal for someone to drive on Fern because it is a public roadway. So we don't designate if they are going to a destination on there or if they're, you know, passing through. Because the volume is so low, I think it would be hard to say that it's getting a significant amount of diverted traffic. And when 85% of the people are going below the posted speed limit, usually that means that there's not a lot of predominant speeding out there. I'm just scrolling through our count data because it'll tell me how many people were going within each kind of like bin of speed. So of the people that were going through, a very small number were even going above 25. I'm just scrolling a little bit more because there's a spot in here that will tell me.
What's the threshold for, I mean, is there a threshold for making decisions? Like if say like, I don't know, 50% of the people were following the speed limit, or I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so generally we're working on drafting a policy that I'll be bringing back to you, but generally what we recommend is that, and what's used by other agencies is that before we would look at a location and say that we think that there's a documented speeding issue, we would need the 85th percentile speed. So the speed at which 85% are going above, are going at or below, would need to be 5 to 6 miles per hour above the posted. So when we look at this location and we see that it's 24 in one direction and 23 in the other, generally that doesn't indicate that we need to look at speed enforcement out there, because the other locations we're looking at, for example, we're working on or getting ready to start work on 79th Avenue. And that has an 85th of, I believe, between 33 and 38, depending on which portion of the corridor you're looking at. And it's also a posted 25. So generally, we would flag it as eligible for further review if it was 6 above the posted, which means we would need the 85th out here to be 31 before we would say, oh, we think we need to do some further investigation of it. And right now it's only at 24 as the 85th. And I am looking the count data analysis that we do, and we collect it for about a week. So it was out there in 2019 for an extended period of time. And it's showing there's a portion in there that looks at the likelihood for successful enforceability based on how fast people are going and some different things like that. And this is showing that it has a 0% above, a 0.0% above percentage above the limit. So if I were to forward this to PD, they would look at it and go, it's not even showing that there's any percentage of people that would qualify for ticketing based on the data we collected over the week. Sorry, that was a lot of data, so let me know if you want to talk about any of that some more.
No,
I think
that's
just-
good to know.
It might be worthwhile mentioning too that, since I think the speed data that we have out here is fairly well reflective of the after results of installing speed humps. So typically you'll get the 85th down to the range of 24, 25 miles an hour after you do a traffic calming installation. So it's very well possible that, speeds were considerably higher before the speed humps went in at this location. I see more hands up. I don't want to miss anybody. Richard, I thought I saw your hand up, but I don't see it anymore. But I do see George, Karine, and Carl.
I did have, I took it down and I put it back up. Sorry.
Okay.
Do you mind if I go next?
Go for it.
Okay. I guess I lowered it because George asked the question I was going to ask. But then I was sitting here thinking about it, and I want to make sure I understand the limitations to adding just gravel along the edge of the road or something like that. Because I've seen some areas in my neighborhood where that's happened. It's not an official walk, but it's a place at least for people to step off in really tight spots. So could they classify it as shoulder work and just put some gravel down along the shoulder of the road? Or does the mere fact that you're widening the shoulder make it an assumed walking path and then it has to meet the ADA requirements? I guess what I'm asking is, are there any improvements we can do to the shoulder that don't trigger the full-blown ADA requirements?
I don't know. Tegan, do you know off the top of your head what the threshold would be there? I mean, I think the bigger issue is just if you look at the street, there just isn't room to add a shoulder without impacting mailboxes and trees and signs and drainage.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that to add any shoulder, it would require a pretty significant clearing of vegetation because it's pretty much right up to the edge of pavement. And so, to add even like a couple feet of shoulder, it would be a pretty big effort to pull stuff out. It's definitely something I can forward to the assistant city engineer to ask his opinion and see what his recommendation would be.
Okay. I just thought something might be better than nothing. And I think it's not just, I have several spots like this in my neighborhood also. Granted, they're not as extensive as Fern, but I see this, low speed limit, but a very narrow street situation all over Tigard. And it is dicey sometimes walking along there. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the reasons that we are moving this 20 mile per hour posted speed initiative forward. And, short of there could be some options. We talked about the 20 mile per hour posted speed, so we're moving forward with that. We're moving forward with adding the shared lane markings to the road. There could be some other sort of striping types of things that we might be able to try in a location like this, but to do, to provide an adequate, pedestrian space, you're really talking about full urban upgrades of the road, and then you're getting into a multi-million-dollar project. So, we're trying to come up with some solutions that can address the problem that can be done, in the relative short term.
Yeah.
Knowing that, someday this needs to get, upgraded. Unless, I'm curious also to hear from more of the neighbors out there, how they feel about the context of this road. It's kind of a unique situation, and it's something that we'll have to have some ongoing conversations with the neighbors out there about.
Yeah.
I do think you bring up a really good point, Dave, because in previous positions that I've had in different areas, when I've worked on spots like this that have really significant vegetation around them, that kind of adds to the character of the community. When there's been conversations about upgrading to a full standard cross section to add amenities like space for bikes and sidewalks, the impact of what that does to clearing so much of the vegetation from it really changes the character of the environment. And so I do think that's something to consider, is that you would lose quite a bit of that vegetation.
Thanks. So I think we had a couple more comments. Kareen, Carl, that's who I see on my list.
So I would suggest Carl first, since I already had a chance to speak.
Thanks, Kareen. Carl?
So I just had a question. So we're talking about the 20-mile-per-hour limit. I mean, every few feet we have these bumps, and every few feet we have a 15-mile-per-hour speed limit sign. Why wouldn't we just lower it to 15 miles per hour throughout this entire segment?
Carl, this is a great question, and it's an opportunity for some education. So the yellow signs you see here those are not speed limit signs. Those are they're called advisory speeds. So
I understand. I understand it's considered an advisory, but why can't we just lower it to 15?
We're not allowed to by state statute, and Tegan can fill us in because she's the current expert on this topic.
Yeah, so right now, local streets within Oregon are considered a statutory 25 miles per hour. And what that means is that they basically default to 25 miles per hour. You have some areas where we have like a special 20-mile-per-hour zone in effect, like in downtown Tigard, because of the character of that area. But it has to meet very specific criteria to have been able to be established that way. And what the state's currently offering now is that we can pass an ordinance as the city that would allow us to implement 20-mile-per-hour zones on areas that meet a certain set of criteria. But that's basically the most that we can do on a local road like this.
So that's the most we could do without further involvement from the state, though.
Yes, but 15 miles per hour is not a speed that I don't think I've ever seen a public roadway that is posted at 15 miles per hour. The lowest I have ever seen is 20. So I don't know that it's an option. You will see, advisory signs like this that say, hey, with caution, you should be going 15 over the bumps. You should be going 15 around this corner. But an advisory speed sign is like a recommendation, like, hey, heads up, we think you might want to slow down for this specific roadway feature that you're at right now, like this curve or this speed hump. But the actual enforceable ticketable speed is still 25 on this facility. And the way you can tell is that an advisory speed sign is yellow, and it's kind of like a caution sign. And then regulatory, or one that they can enforce with ticketing, is going to be the white sign with the black speed lettering and speed number.
So, Tegan, this is Kareen again. You talked about how there are, some kind of short-term things we can do, and I think that's great. I'm wondering if the fact that it's a neighborhood route means we can't consider it for the Streets for the People program. But I was also wondering, kind of long-term, it seems like part of why there are so many vehicle-pedestrian conflicts is the presence of lots of pedestrians, which makes sense because there's the Ascension trailhead. And we really want the people in our community to be able to access these trails and be able to access trails safely. And I'm wondering if, you know, this situation might somehow inform how we think about doing CIP projects and, you know, really to create a safer situation for pedestrians. Dave talked about how we would really need like kind of a full street upgrade, sewer, stormwater, lighting, curbs, and sidewalks, all of which would be very expensive. But should streets like this that provide that trail access be something we prioritize when we plan how we spend our scarce transportation dollars? So there's the streets for the people and then the CIP question.
Thanks, Corrine. Those are good things to bring up. So I know Shelley's on the phone, so I want to acknowledge that she did email inquiring about the Streets for People pilot, which is now over for the season, but it is something we're going to be talking about later in the meeting about potentially relaunching it in the spring. And given that this is close to the Ascension Trailhead, I think there is an opportunity to talk about including it. To your second question, in terms of prioritization through CIP and through the transportation system plan, you know, both through our current process and how we prioritize projects, projects that are nearby trailheads or, you know, schools or other, you know, pedestrian attractors or generators do score higher. So, but there's a number of other criteria that are thrown in there as well. And so I can't tell you exactly how this would come out in the scoring, but it's something that we can certainly look at. So you know, the Streets for People is something that's kind of temporary, you know, traffic calming, pop-up kind of measures, and then we're also talking about bigger projects, you know, full urban upgrades through the typical CIP process. So I think we can probably find some opportunities to try to improve things. And, you know, I guess one thing also to point out is, you know, right before I joined City of Tigard, I think Ttac had just wrapped up a, I can't remember, somebody who was on the committee is going to have to help me out here because I wasn't here when you did it, but you did the slow driver pledge or safe driver pledge program. Was anyone around who participated in that? You know, that's another option to do something like that. You know, the people who are driving through here, you know, while there's some people that are using it from elsewhere, the people who are driving here are the people that live in and around this area. And so, you know, there is something to be said about doing some kind of a targeted, you know, education campaign for the people that are driving here to just try to get people to slow down a little bit, especially given the, you know, what we see here where it is a shared roadway where you have different modes of mixing on the road.
Yeah, I don't remember Dave really working on that prior to you joining us. So I've heard about it in other areas. This is Ruth, and it certainly is something that we could consider. So any other comments or questions as we kind of look at our time here?
Hey, Ruth, this is George. Just that program was called Slow Your Roll. There were signs and bumper stickers and a pledge and a website up through the City Tigard where you could go on there and sign up, and then you got a sticker for your car and a sign for your yard.
Thank you, George.
Thanks, George. So I think, you know, staff can report back to you as we make progress on this and continue the conversation with the neighbors out here so we can keep you apprised of what's happening.
Yeah, Yeah, that's great. I'm really glad that we had the, that Shelley brought this to our attention.
I have a related question. My understanding is that you are responsible for vegetation that crowds the sidewalk or the road out. Is that correct? Like if you're a homeowner, if your lawn is covering or your trees are blocking the sidewalk, you're responsible for clearing that?
That's correct.
So the property owners here who are letting the vegetation cross over, encroach on the road, are they under any obligation to cut that back?
Yeah, so if we felt that it was encroaching in like the public right of way, our code enforcement could reach out and basically issue them a letter letting them know that they needed to take care of it. Generally, we don't go around, like, we don't drive around and like look for encroachments and things to like write to people. It's usually if it's brought to our attention and we take a look at it, then we see it. So, I mean, looking at the street view here, it's kind of hard to tell where the right-of-way line is and where the landscaping or vegetation is going up to, because it's, it's kind of at the pavement edge. So, I'm not entirely sure. It's more of an issue where, like, sorry, excuse me, there might be a property owner whose shrub was growing up and covering a stop sign. Then we would say, oh, you're very clearly in the right of way because the stop sign's in the right of way. But looking at the part where there's the most vegetation on the south side of Fern, most of that, it's just kind of at the edge of pavement.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Keegan, for all of your information. We appreciate it. So I think if we want to move ahead, Ttac member items, I believe we have at least one that we wanted to be sure to get on the agenda for later discussion. Is that right, Dave?
Well, I don't know. Serge, did you have something you wanted to raise with the group tonight?
Yes, I did.
Okay. So Serge has an item. Any other items? Okay. We'll save some time at the end for you, Serge, and we're going to transition to our next item then.
So Skylar's going to talk with us about the River Terrace concept planning.
That's right.
All right. Good evening, everyone. I'm Skylar Warren, Senior Planner, City of Tigard. I'm the City Project Manager for Concept Planning in what we're calling River Terrace 2.0. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Hopefully you all can see that.
Yes, I can.
All right, perfect. So we have a multidisciplinary consultant team that we are working with, as well as working with our stakeholders all across the city to build out a concept plan for the city's two remaining urban reserves, which are known as River Terrace West and South. I'm going to make a quick note here before I move on to the next slide, that as I go through this presentation, you'll notice that some of the slides are actually translated into Spanish. That's because they're the same slides that we use in many of our public outreach events. As much as possible, I try to preserve those translations when I'm doing presentations. That way, when this presentation is made part of the public record, someone coming back to it later on will hopefully be able to read at least some of it if they do not have English as a first language. Let's see here. There we go. I want to talk a little bit just right off the bat about what we're doing, what a concept plan is. Some of you may be familiar with this process, depending on how long you've been involved in serving on committees with the city. really brief overview. When we talk about concept planning, we're talking about really just the first step in preparing land for eventual development. So we're looking at two areas that are outside the city limits, outside the metro urban growth boundary. And what we're doing is we're starting to collect ideas and knowledge from experts that help to inform our plan. And the end result of that will be what's known as a concept plan. And that is a very high level vision for how the area will develop. And again, it is just the first step. So we're not going to resolve to a level of specificity some of the things that may come into your purview on this committee, but it's certainly setting the framework for how transportation and other things will work in this area in the future. So once we've done that, we take that concept plan to Metro, and they either approve or don't approve our plan for this area. If they approve, then it's brought into the urban growth boundary, and then we continue on to the next step, which is a community plan. And this one is much more detailed than the concept plan. So we start to take that vision and we start to piece together some of the details about how it is going to work. That results in a zoning map for this area, a development code for it, and the set of regulations that will govern development in the area. And then, of course, the last step is development itself, and the plan itself is even tweaked further during that development stage, because sometimes we just don't have all the knowledge. We can't have perfect knowledge about what's on the ground in the area, and the designers involved in each individual development will have some ideas about how they can resolve some of the specific needs of the area. And so that's kind of the final step there. So I'm going to talk a little bit, just really quickly, get you all kind of acquainted with where we're talking about. This map shows the city of Tigard here in light blue. The city of King City is, in yellow here to the south, and Beaverton is in pink to the north. The two areas that we're talking about are what we call River Terrace West and River Terrace South, and they're in that darker blue color there. As you can see, they are adjacent to the current River Terrace area. River Terrace South is just north of Beef Bend, stretching from 150th over to Roy Rogers. And River Terrace West is south of Shoals Ferry and west, generally west of Roy Rogers. So we've been working with the community to develop a vision for this project. And that starts with the adopted strategic plan that we have in the city. And I believe that you all may have been at least briefed on that process. Hopefully you're at least marginally familiar with the city's strategic plan and the strategic vision. So this is a way of basically taking that strategic plan and the strategic vision and making it part of this project. So we have a high-level focus statement that sits above all the work that we do. And it basically says that we're focusing our work through two lenses, and those lenses are length, they're equity and climate change. And they kind of function as a pair of glasses that we use to view all the work that we do. And they guide the vision of the project. And as such, we seek to center the voices of communities of color, immigrants, and people with low incomes. And the reason for that is that those communities are among the most affected by the impacts of environmental inequities, climate change, and systemic racism. And so the benefit of that is that when we protect and meet the needs of the most vulnerable members of our community, then the health and well-being of all community members improves. So this project has a vision statement as well, and this is kind of the high level vision for what we want to achieve here. And this is something that has been developed in close consultation with our community advisory committee that's made up of 12 members of the community. And we gave them, some kind of skeletal topics that we want to touch on, that we need to touch on in this area. And they helped us to kind of build this vision. And we've also put this vision out to the community through a public open house that was open through most of the month of January. So I am going to kind of read through this because I think it is important to understand what we're talking about here and what the vision for this area is. River Terrace 2.0 is a neighborhood for everyone and a complete community. It offers housing opportunities to the full diversity of Tigard's families and households. This community is made complete by providing space for small businesses and a thriving local economy, a variety of housing options, and accessible parks and open spaces. The transportation system treats all modes equally with walking and biking trails throughout the community, a road system that emphasizes safety and regional access, and a development pattern that supports an efficient public transit system. Public spaces and parks offer places for the community to gather. Natural areas are protected and enhanced to emphasize habitats and scenic views. Public utilities are designed to maximize cost efficiency and long-term fiscal sustainability, and the costs of necessary infrastructure are shared in an equitable manner. There's definitely some things in there that probably touch on the interests of this committee. So one of the early things that we did in this project is put out a community survey in collaboration with staff who are working on the TSP. Thank you, Dave. As well as staff who are working on our commercial and industrial zones update. And so we put out the survey at a very high level. We didn't talk about really any of those projects. We made sure that there were links to those projects so people can learn about them. But instead of asking them, what do you think about the transportation system plan? What do you think about River Terrace 2.0? What do you think about the commercial industrial project Tigard made? We're really asking people, what do you look for in a neighborhood, right? Like what are the things that are in your neighborhood now that you love? What are the things that you wish you had in your neighborhood but you don't have? What really makes a livable community for you? And we got some great feedback. We touched on a number of topics. One of which was housing. And I'm just going to detail a few of the questions here. I'm not going to go through the whole survey, but we asked people, how much do you agree with the following statements? And the first was Tigard needs a greater variety of housing in terms of housing types and prices. And almost 2/3 of the respondents said that they agreed with that statement. Then we asked, we posed the statement, lack of affordable housing is an important issue in Tigard. And again, similar number, about 60% agreed with that statement. And then when we asked, what do you think of this statement? Young families can find housing they can afford in Tigard. Almost half of the respondents said they disagreed with that statement. And when we asked, or we posed the statement, single people can find housing they can afford in Tigard, a slightly larger number, 56% disagreed with that. So, those questions together tell us that there are some housing issues, and that shapes kind of what we're trying to achieve here. And when we ask them what makes it most difficult to find housing in Tigard, the number one answer is cost. And the number two answer is not enough housing for sale, but cost certainly far outstrips any of the other responses here. But we do know that cost and not enough housing for sale are very related issues, right? So when we pose the question, when thinking about a place to live, what type of living situation would you prefer? 93% of the respondents said they prefer to own the place where they live. It is worth noting this survey, we asked some demographic information. A similar number of people also responded that they currently are homeowners. So in some sense that maybe this number would be a little different if we'd gotten a higher renter percentage. But I think the bigger point there is that when we have homeowners who are responding that housing cost is an issue, a lack of affordable housing is an issue, a lack of variety in our housing is an issue, that's a pretty telling thing. Imagine how much different, how much stronger those statements would have been had we had a higher percentage of renters responding. So some of the transportation related questions, when thinking about a place to live, what features are most important to you? Safe streets and sidewalks was the #1 response. So that comes in ahead of some of the things that we typically expect to see at the top of these surveys. So clearly, transportation system, a safe one is pretty important. And we asked which of the following would encourage you to use public transit more often? Stops closer to my home was the #1 answer. More frequent service is the second, and then connections to paths or trails at stops is pretty important as well. When we ask people, what kind of businesses do you like to see within, I kind of look at this as within walking distance, that those first 2 bands, within a quarter mile, within a half mile. That's generally that kind of that 1/3 in that 1/3 mile walking radius. Coffee shops and takeout restaurants, people definitely want to see those within walking distance. Dine-in restaurants to some degree. And then, within 1 mile, about half are wanting to see small non-food retail shops. But a really interesting one is that even with some of the ones where it's not, people don't want to see them necessarily quite that close, they're still wanting to see personal services, professional services, and even big box retail within 1 to 3 miles of their homes. So based on the information and the project vision, our design team got to work coming up with some concept alternatives. And I'll run through these really quick because I know you all have a lot of other things to talk about tonight. But I do want to give you just kind of a high-level view of what these are all about. Concept A, and you'll have to forgive me that a lot of these are organized around the basics of commercial housing and transportation, but the sort of visual focus here is on the commercial area. I don't want to give the idea that these areas are mostly commercial, but this was a way to show how the commercial works with the housing and how that works together with the transportation system. So the first one has commercial areas that are up next to the arterial roads like Beef Bend, Roy Rogers, Shoals Ferry, and these are the kind of typical things that you see in commercial development in areas near the urban fringe. It's big box anchor stores with some sprinkled retail around it, a lot of surface parking lots, 1 to 2 story buildings surrounded by some larger form housing, apartments, that kind of thing, and then stepping down as you get further away. And then this concept would be one that we would expect to see, that transition along a transect, like what you see in that profile at the top, where we do see the larger forms of housing near the commercial area, and we're stepping down to smaller forms near the edge. The other thing about this transportation system, in terms of bike-ped interaction, you're going to be bringing bicyclists and pedestrians from within the neighborhood into that commercial center through the back, right? And you're going to have the vehicles coming in. There's going to be a lot of regional traffic coming here from King City, from Beaverton, from other parts of Tigard. And they're going to be coming in along that main corridor and parking in that surface parking lot, but it's going to be higher volume. You don't want those things necessarily mixing, and so you're bringing the bike-ped traffic in along the back. So it's a very segregated system. And then if you have transit service out there, and that's one of the goals for this, and King City and Beaverton share our goals to have transit service brought out to these areas, it's probably going to be along the arterials, right? You're going to have the bus service kind of maybe dropping into this area, but maybe just dropping people off and picking them up along the arterial in a cutout. You know, there's pluses and minuses there. Option B, concept B, is what we call the Main Street concept. And this one, instead of having that big box retail, we might have some bigger retail along the arterial, but really we're spreading that acreage of the retail out along the main corridor, and it's smaller in form. You might have an anchor store at the corner, but you don't have the like kind of sprinkling of other stuff around it. That stuff's going to be kind of carried through the neighborhood. So you're also going to see more of the mixed use there, where you have maybe some retail with residential above it. You're going to have some smaller scale neighborhood services and commercial operations, small restaurants, that kind of thing. In terms of the housing, this is more of an even mix. So you don't have quite the same, you know, very stark change from one end to the other. You're sort of mixing and matching from block to block, different housing forms, but you're also not getting as much of the large apartments on one end, and you're also not getting as much of the super small stuff on the other end. It is like kind of lopping off either ends of that and kind of focusing on middle-sized housing, although you do have some large lot, single detached houses. You know, that's always going to be part of the mix. Then in terms of the transportation system, that main corridor would be one where you would see bicyclists, pedestrians, and vehicles kind of sharing the road a little bit. There would be bike lanes, but on-street parking. You'd also have some tuck behind parking for the commercial areas, so overflow parking could be back there. But you know, you're really talking more of that Main Street feel. Transit service in this concept could still be along the arterial, like what we talked about in the last one, but now we're starting to look at the potential to maybe bring transit service from the King City Town Center down here off the map, up through the Main Street corridor and up along River Terrace Boulevard and cutting over across Roy Rogers into the neighborhood in River Terrace West. So it is more of that neighborhood feel. It also has the benefit of reducing conflicts for transit, getting them off the arterials. So that helps transit run more efficiently as well. And it also makes the stops more comfortable. Based on what we're hearing from the community, we think that you know, people would be more likely to come wait for transit in an area where there's lower speed traffic. And there's amenities around, like you can go get a cup of coffee and that kind of thing while you're waiting. Concept C, this one is a very internally focused neighborhood. So this is very small scale commercial area, very sort of old world European almost is what I kind of think of it as. You know, you're going to have very few shops, maybe a little corner convenience store, maybe some small neighborhood retail services, maybe a small scale restaurant or two, maybe some small scale professional services. And then the neighborhood itself, in terms of that transect, it is, you know, going to have more larger form, but not quite as large form as concept A, apartment style and row house style housing development around that commercial core. And then again, moving away towards smaller forms at the edge. So what we heard from the community, both from our community advisory committee and from the online open house that we held, they really liked concepts B and C. Really, concept B came to the fore as like kind of the primary one that people liked. And then concept A, that more traditional, conventional style of development, was in a distant third. And so based on that feedback, the design team got to work coming up with a preferred alternative. And what I'm showing you right now is very, very early draft. We still have some stuff to consider here. So don't think that, you know, this is like the way that this is going to look in its final form. And there's some explanatory stuff that probably will be necessary to really make this you know, an understandable map. But I do want to share it with you because it shows how we've kind of married some of those concepts. We did hear that there was a need for more employment land from our finance and economic development staff. We knew that going in. That was always intended to go into River Terrace West. And combined with the need that we heard from current River Terrace residents and our CAC for a need for a grocery store in this area, we kind of developed a grocery store centered retail concept up along Shoals Ferry Road, surrounded by some employment lands, office, flex space, maybe even some light industrial. And then that more internally focused core is sort of here in the middle. And that still kind of has that Main Street concept connecting it, because our commercial market analysis told us that the standalone internal commercial area would probably not succeed. And then the southern portion, River Terrace South along River Terrace Boulevard, would have that Main Street focus. The neighborhoods are basically still organized around that Main Street corridor. It's tended to balance the livability and internal focus with the viability for the commercial areas, so making sure that like they still can be supported by external access. There's a future north-south collector road that's shown here. This map will show it a little better. You can see it here on this left-hand side. The dashed line is there because there's still some question about do we need that full collector, or do we have traffic levels that could be supported by this existing planned connection down through here. Yet to be resolved. Obviously, making this connection is more expensive. We've got to cross a lot of streams there. And then when I talk about flexibility, there has been for some time a goal by the county to handle regional traffic through this area by extending Towel Flat Road that currently dead ends in a T over here off map at Shoals Ferry. They want to eventually bring that in and connect it and offload, I think, some of the traffic impact on Roy Rogers through that area and bring it down through here. So this is flexible enough that it could accommodate that. We would want to see, of course, lower speed traffic. We don't want to see high speed regional traffic move through here. And so where it would connect with this north-south collector, it would be in the form of a roundabout, perhaps. I mean, that's kind of the early thinking on it. And that would be similar to some of the intersections in River Terrace along River Terrace Boulevard. There's a lot I could still talk about here. We think this one has the maximum flexibility for transit. Obviously, we haven't resolved some of the street level networks, but I want to leave sufficient time here. I could talk for a long time. I want to be able to take questions and comments from you all. This project's moving pretty quickly. We are nearing the end. In early spring, we'll complete that concept plan report and then bring the concept plan to Planning Commission and City Council in the spring for an approval.
All right. Lots of information. Thank you, Skylar. So, do you want to go ahead, Dave, and call on people? Or?
Yeah, and Ruth, I'm getting a little echo. I'm not sure if that's me or you.
I think it's me.
Okay. Yes, I see some hands up. So let me ask, Richard, is your hand up from previously or for this one?
That was from previously. Sorry.
Okay, no problem. So let's see, I've got Lindsay, Michael, and then Alan.
Hi, this is Lindsay. Great presentation. I was really happy to see that the focus group and survey folks turned down the big box stores. I don't think that that's particularly welcoming for mixed middle housing in new neighborhoods, so I was happy to see that. I am curious how you plan to have missing middle housing accomplished. Is that through zoning, or are there other ways to emphasize development of missing middle options?
Yeah, that's a great question. One of the things that would be accompanying that map that you saw is a series of what we're calling housing typologies. And that's showing different, you can consider them almost zones, or they're proto zones, because we actually don't have zoning yet. We won't at this stage of the plan. But they would inform eventually, I think, the zoning work that we'll do as part of the community plan. And they show, basically a mix of housing that would allow us to achieve an overall target number of households per acre. And right now that target is 20 units per acre. And that would allow us to get a good amount of missing middle housing in there. And the intent is really, as much as possible, to integrate that in the neighborhood. And the thinking is that at a integrated neighborhood, in terms of housing types, is also going to be more economically integrated. And it's also going to be more age and stage of life integrated. So, for example, I live in a neighborhood where I live in a home where I've got 2 kids and a spouse, and we have more space and have more need for outdoor area. I have a parent who lives 2 blocks from me. They need a home that's about 700 square feet. That's all they want, right? And we want to make sure that the neighborhood is able to support that diversity in housing options, so that people who age into the need for larger housing and age out of the need for larger housing can stay connected with their community, stay in the same area that they have lived if they'd like to, and that there's opportunity for everyone to kind of find that right size house within a neighborhood.
Cool, thanks.
All right, Michael.
So I had 2 questions. My first question is the city concerned about, with like the BC option, creating multiple main streets, if you will, and basically detracting from the actual main street in Tigard? And then my second question is, are there plans for like low income housing, like what was proposed for if the city hall gets replaced and consolidated, having low income housing in this area, similar to that, I guess?
Yeah, great questions. I'll tackle the second one first, since it's kind of tied to that housing question. One of the other things that we're looking at closely with our consultants is opportunities for affordable housing, both permanent affordable housing in the form of affordable home ownership through something like a community land trust, that kind of thing. And then also for regulated affordable rental housing. And, at this stage, we're mainly looking at what are the options for finding the right incentives package to make that feasible, because as you can imagine, land costs in these areas can be high. And so what kind of policies should the city consider if it would like to help an affordable housing provider move into this area and provide a mix of affordable housing? Because the other thing is that some of the commercial areas in this development are going to be service level, entry level jobs, service industry jobs, Typically, those jobs don't always pay as much, but it is important to have, you know, affordable housing nearby that someone can afford on the salary that they're making. And likewise, it's important to have jobs nearby for people who are living in affordable housing. So it's really about making that complete community that we talked about in the vision statement. And then with the other question, that's a great question. I don't think we're really concerned at this stage, at least not at the staff level, that we would be sort of a detriment to the main street of Tigard, because I think, you know, downtown Tigard has its own kind of presence in the community, and we have a lot of investment there. And I think downtown Tigard is poised to grow over the coming decades in a way that this would never grow. This is sort of a frozen in time main street that's, you know, almost like a trolley stop neighborhood from the time when Tigard downtown was literally a trolley stop neighborhood. And so part of the reason that we're looking at that Main Street connection is that transit piece, making sure that there's, you know, adequate destinations there to bring people to where the transit stops are, and for TriMet to be able to bring service in. We're looking at continuing. King City has a concept for their area, King City West, that you may be familiar with, that they're developing, that has an actual town center that would perhaps have a town hall and some other community services, a school, some commercial areas, some employment lands, and that Main Street area and south would be a continuation of that across Beef Bend Road. So kind of reflecting and continuing the bigger town center that they will have. So it's kind of, you can look at it as a future King City Main Street. And then the other reason we're looking at that is we do want to make sure we're not trying to supplant other commercial areas, but we are trying to make sure that people can get the things they need in their neighborhood. You know, maybe you have a local dentist that you need to get to. You know, can you get bread and milk in your neighborhood, some soda without having to get in your car? Can you and your family walk to a restaurant nearby, or do you have to get in your car to do it? Can you get on your bike and get to a park? That kind of thing. So, you know, we have a lot of areas in Tigard to date that have been developed without that support, and it actually kind of exacerbates some of the traffic issues in the city, because people do have to get into areas to buy food and go to restaurants, that kind of thing. Yeah, so you know, the Main Street area also, as I said, it's the most mutually supportive in terms of a multimodal backbone for the neighborhood, and so that's part of the reason that we've settled on that form.
Thanks. We have a couple more questions here. I think that Alan, Holly, and then Richard.
So Skylar, very same or similar track, just thinking about the actual road infrastructure. Is there a process in place to plan for like 20, 50, 100 years down the road? Because the actual road seems like it'd be easier to change, but not the planning for how the roads go and how it could expand or contract over time. Probably expand if the area wants to grow outwards. I mean, tile flats is a good example of potential connecting, but what happens when the urban growth boundary goes beyond that, and now you're stuck with the funky mix of roads like we see in other areas that expand and don't plan for something like that? You're muted.
Sorry about that. That's a great question. You know, in terms of regional mobility, I think the question that you're asking about is really kind of getting more to that regional mobility point, and certainly the city of Tigard has a role to play there. You know, we have collectors and we have arterials that play a role as part of the larger network. In this area, most of the regional mobility is handled on county facilities like Roy Rogers, Beef Bend, Shoals Ferry, Towel Flat. And so, generally speaking, a lot of the mobility is going to be handled in those right-of-ways when you're trying to get further out. And so when people are connecting in to, when they want to get to I-5 from those areas that you're talking about that might eventually come to the west, they're going to be traveling along Shoals Ferry, because that's going to be that east-west connector. The north-south collector, because you have to get across the Tualatin River, there is that pinch point of the bridge on Roy Rogers. So that's, at least for the foreseeable future, until there's another north-south arterial that's further out, that's going to be that north-south connection point. And so what we're focused on is how do we balance connections out to that regional network with the interconnections, getting people to the inner destinations in those neighborhoods, and balancing the safety aspect, right? That desire that we heard from people, that the first thing they look for in a neighborhood is safe streets and sidewalks. So it is an important balancing act, and part of the consideration is how do we get people safely across those arterials, right? Because if they're going to carry that regional mobility level traffic, we still want to be able to get people across Shoals and across Roy Rogers. And so how do we do that in a way that is safe and makes those neighborhoods not feel like they have, a wall between them, a wall of traffic? So it's a complex question, and one that we'll continue to, kind of resolve as we get into the community plan. Right now, we're looking at kind of the backbone framework of the collector level roads.
As you were talking, I was looking at the street view, and I realized that the river basically parallels Roy Rogers. So it kind of answered my question, is there's a physical barrier there that prevents too much expansion in that direction anyway. So
right,
not as much large of a concern from my perspective.
Great. So we've got Holly and then Richard, and then I think we might want to try to wrap this topic up shortly.
Sounds good. Thank you. So great information and great presentation. So interesting to hear what's coming down the pipe. So I'm curious as to whether or not your team has contemplated what the plan looks like, or even revisited if this is the best plan going forward in the wake of COVID. You read all these things on the Wall Street Journal and in Business Week about how housing trends are changing and how people's comfort level with living in close proximity to other people is changing, and people are trying to move away from some of those metropolitan urban centers. Have you given that any consideration in this plan?
Yeah, I mean, I think we'd be remiss to not think about COVID in terms of what's going on here. I think in terms of the housing, it's less of an impact, because this is going to still be, this isn't like a high-rise downtown Portland kind of development. It's missing middle, it's smaller lot, but it's not people stacked on top of one another in quite the same way. It's more smaller, a mix of smaller forms of housing mixed in with medium-sized forms and large forms. There will be some large lot housing, there will be some row houses, there will be some apartments, but I don't think that, that has had a huge impact. I think where it has had a huge impact on us in terms of the big unknown is in the commercial area, because retail, just commercial real estate right now is in a state of, well, let's say flux, right? There's just a lot of unknowns. There's a lot of businesses that are probably not going to make it out the other end of this pandemic, even big scale businesses. I think what we've tried to settle on is something that has flexibility, and we know that there's not going to be people are still going to want to go to restaurants. They're still going to need to visit small offices. Those kind of things are not going to go away. And in actuality, we're trying to seize on the opportunity for more. I think a lot of people have jobs. You might be looking to live in this area where their employer has decided that they'll go to a more flexible format, and that flex office space could be a boon for this area, which has the benefit also of cutting down on commuters moving in and out of this area and using those regional facilities. So that could possibly be a benefit. We want to make sure that we're seizing on that, but we're really at this stage leaving things open and flexible as kind of a holding pattern until we get to the community plan stage, when hopefully we'll have a little better idea of where we might be able to seize some opportunities.
Thank you.
Great. So I think Richard has the last question here.
Hey, my question is, how does the direction of this design, this concept design, differ from what's existing with River Terrace? You know, how does it contrast, or how does it complement what's already there? And
yeah,
not just in form, but it's probably too soon to talk about character, but I guess it is in big idea stage.
Yeah,
so.
It's intended to kind of seamlessly be part of that neighborhood. You know, one of the tough things about River Terrace 1 is that just because of the way it was planned and the way the market has gone in recent years, a lot of that housing is larger form housing. There's not a lot of opportunities for first-time home buyers out there, small families, for seniors, and the price points of the housing are reflective of how large the housing is, right? So you're talking about homes starting in the 600s to 700s, and that's out of reach for even people who aren't just first-time home buyers, but who might be middle income families, right? And so one of the goals that we have here, and it's in alignment with the sort of change in housing policy, both at the city of Tigard, but also at the state level with House Bill 2001 and 2003. We're looking for a greater mix of housing to make sure that overall the area has opportunity for everyone. And there will continue to be large form housing developed in River Terrace 1. And the stuff that's already there is going to continue to, turn over in the market from year over. But even the developer, William, Taylor Morrison, that is doing most of the development in River Terrace 1, we're hearing from them that the market is dropping out on the large form housing, and they're actually coming in to modify some of their already approved development plans to go to a more smaller form housing, houses with ADUs, duplexes, triplexes, that kind of thing, because that's where the market's going. People are wanting smaller housing. They're wanting more affordable housing.
Thanks.
Okay, I think that was the last hand that I saw raised. So, Skylar, maybe if you could just let the group know what opportunities for input will there be going forward? What do you see as Ttac's role as the Transportation Advisory Committee for Tigard on this project?
Yeah, so a couple of things. We have an online open house that is going to be going live sometime. I don't have the date in front of me. It is in end of February or early March. I can send it to you, Dave, and you can send it out to the group. That's a great way to give some feedback. We have a website up. It's at engage.tigard-or.gov/RT2 for River Terrace 2. And you can leave us comments there, learn more about the project there. And I would say Ttac will probably have an increasing role when we get to the community plan stage, because that is when we get down to that street network level, and we will start talking more about transit and how to solve for some of our transit goals and bike ped goals in this project. So there's more to come. Stay tuned.
Great, thank you, and thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you all.
Yes, thank you, Skylar.
Thanks, Skylar.
That was great.
Thank you, Skylar.
Okay, well, Dave, do we want to, do a quick overview of the work plan and then let Serge share his item, or do we want to switch them?
Why don't I can sort of breeze through this, and it's something that we can pick up on later as well. So if
Well,
we
we
can
had a committee that met, so we could maybe meet again and then have more time at the next meeting to present.
Yeah, so maybe I'll take 10 or 15 minutes and any
Yeah.
input from anybody, and then we'll turn it over to Serge and any other items we want to cover. So I'm going to share my screen again. Yeah.
If Counselor Krause here, I got to head out for the night, so I'm logging off.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Oh, great. So I think you can see my screen now. So just as a, letting the committee know, so we had a subcommittee meet, and that was Ruth, Kareen, Carl, and myself. And actually, this is a good time to maybe let the committee know that Sarah Serrata had also volunteered for that committee. But I don't know that we've actually made the official announcement, so I'll announce it right now that Sarah has resigned her position because she took a job opportunity in Toronto, Canada. So FYI for the group, I thought she was going to potentially be here tonight to say goodbye, but it looks like she's not with us. So I wanted to share that with the group so everyone knew. But I'll go ahead and this is sort of my report back from our meeting. So this is to help prepare us for work ahead for this year. So just starting with goals and focus areas. So number one here is this concept around transportation equity. The second one was, again, turning back to the Complete Streets implementation plan. We have some tasks outlined there that we're responsible for helping implement. So I'll cover that, what we might expect for this year. We wanted to talk a little bit about the Ttac composition and recruitment process. So this is one of the items that we shared with the City Council at the end of last year in terms of improving our representation and diversity of the committee looking forward. And then the last item here is ongoing work. So just thinking about the projects, initiatives, and bigger picture transportation budget items that are going to be coming down our way this year. So we'll go through this quickly, and feel free if you have any questions or comments you want to make. So one of the ideas that I think kind of came out of our conversation here with this subcommittee was thinking more about transportation equity. I really liked how this conversation went with the subcommittee. And I gave it a little more thought and kind of put together some bullet points here about what this might look like. So basically the goal here would be to build Ttac's foundational knowledge around transportation equity issues. It's a topic that's been reported on quite a bit over the last year or so. And it's something that I think could be really beneficial for the community to focus in on. So how might we do that? So I put together some potential opportunities for the coming year. I thought one of the ways that we could potentially do this, if people are open to it or interested in it, is to put together a recommended readings, whether that's a book or articles that we can read, and then it could be a book club format, or if people want to just read articles or books on their own and then report back to the committee on what they learned. I think that could be an interesting opportunity, especially just given COVID. Seems like people are reading a lot more these days. The next item here is we talked about putting together a panel presentation at a future Ttac meeting with some experts in the field, and I'm pretty excited about this. I think, before COVID hit, we had done our Tigard on the Move speaker series, and I think this is something we could bring back again if we want to put together this panel and have one Tigard on the Move event for 2021 that we prepare for and Ttac hosts again. I thought those worked pretty well, and I think we could do that again. I've talked to Lauren Scott, who helped me with the Tigard on the Move last time, and she's very interested in the idea. The other thing we discussed was doing a presentation on the city's GIS transportation needs equity analysis tool. So, we could set up a time for staff to come present on how this tool works and how we are integrating this into our project work. And then lastly, these 2 points is, these are some things that we'll be doing in the next year. Is we're going to be updating our TSP project prioritization methodology, and equity is going to be a strong piece of that. And so it's something that, if Ttac is building their knowledge around here, they can help us, make better decisions in how we do this. And then the same thing for the CIP project prioritization as well. So any comments or questions about this idea? Karine. Yeah.
Hi, yes. So I guess I really like this goal, which is unsurprising, but I'm a little, I feel like we're kind of missing a basic building blocks option here in those opportunities. And if we don't, everybody in the group don't have those basic building blocks, it's really hard to say that we have this foundational knowledge. I just see those recommended readings and the panel presentations being kind of like opt-in activities rather than something that's occurring in the course of a regular Ttac meeting. So I like all the opportunities, but I'd like to maybe see an additional staff presentation about some of the basics of what do we mean when we're even talking about transportation equity and what are those kind of core issues. Otherwise, I think this is great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and certainly that's a great great input. And I think we could start this off even with next month's meeting with a staff presentation on the issues, and then build out from there. So thank you, Karine. Any other comments on this one?
I just had a quick comment.
Yeah.
So I guess what interests me is the GIS thing, because data tells a lot of how the city is designed, or the composition of the city, I guess is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if you're a data geek, like most people in the planning field are, I think you'll get a lot out of this. It's pretty interesting tool that our team has put together. So I'm sure they'd happy to be get in front of Ttac to present on it.
I know we had talked about trying to do that, sooner than later. So that might be a good beginning point.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, this is David. I would absolutely give a +1 to that. I'd love to see that.
Okay. Great. Well, just given, we're a little short on time tonight, I think what we'll do is maybe I'll reconvene our little subcommittee, and we'll kind of fill out a calendar of what this might look like for the year, and then we can kick it off for our March meeting.
That'd be great.
Okay, good. So I'm going to move on. Oops, wrong computer. There we go. Thank you, Ruth. Ruth put together a table that showed some of the Complete Streets implementation activities that are on the horizon, and some notes about kind of interest and what we could do for 2021. I took that, Ruth, and sort of turned it into this slide based off my knowledge of where we're at. So these are some of the key implementation activities for 2021 that I think we can focus on. And some of these are based off our conversation that we had as a smaller group. So the first one up there is the transportation funding picture. And we had talked about potentially doing this towards the later part of the summer, is having our finance and probably some public works engineering staff provide a presentation to Ttac on just generally transportation funding and what our outlook is for transportation funding for the city going forward. And I nested some other items below these bigger topics. So I think the sidewalk gap infill program could potentially fit under here, because it's something that we know we have a sidewalk gap problem, and we have a lot of sidewalk gaps within the city of Tigard, and the main issue here is we just don't have enough funding to get those constructed. So having that conversation in the context of the transportation funding conversation could be a good way to maybe start taking some forward steps towards addressing that problem. The next one here is the transportation system plan update. So as most of you know, we're kind of in the middle of that process right now. Have a couple of Ttac members who are sitting on our community advisory committee for the project, and I put 4 key items underneath here that we are working on with the TSP. So we're going to be able to make some really good forward progress in these items. So the performance measures for Complete Streets, the ped bike network plans, pedestrian crossing improvement recommendations, and then also incorporating our transportation safety action plan recommendations into the TSP. So pretty excited to get a lot of that work done this year. Next one was Complete Streets educational materials, and I think when we met, Kareen asked why haven't we done this yet, and I think it's something that we can do. I think what we might do is at the staff level is put together a draft design, and this is like maybe a little brochure or a handout that we can keep at city buildings and get Ttac's input on it. So I think we can do that this year. Next one is the Parks Master Plan update. So we've already had a presentation from our Parks Department, and I think we'd like to keep you engaged going forward, because there's such a close link between transportation and parks. So we'll keep you engaged on that going forward. And then finally, right now, our engineering team is working on updating their engineering design standards. And I'd like to make sure that we bring Ttac some regular updates about that over the year. So these are sort of the key Complete Streets items I think we can take on for 2021. Any comments or questions about those?
Is any prioritization with the list, or is this just flat list of equal weights of?
These are so David, for the benefit of David and Michael here, actually this is probably a question for Joe. Joe, did we send David and Michael any packets of Ttac materials yet?
No.
Okay, so David and Michael will do that. We'll get you your onboarding stuff as soon as possible. And one of those items is the Complete Streets policy and implementation plan. And you'll see in there that it has timelines associated with these items. And so for the most part, I think the ones on this list are the ones that are sort of within the 1 to 3 year time frame. Yeah. And the policy was adopted in summer of 2019. So we're on track. You'll see some other items in there that are a bit further out. So yeah, great question.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful.
Yeah, there were actually 20 different implementation activities. And so what Dave has done is we pulled out the ones that we had our name next to and kind of looked at how we were already kind of taking them on. So I like it.
Good. Okay, I'm going to keep moving on so we can save a little bit of time here. So I think this is the second to last slide here. So this is something that I think we'll approach toward the end of the year. And I'd like to try, if we can time this right, to be able to present this back to City Council at our annual meeting with City Council. And this is just to come up with some recommendations. And this doesn't have to be a ton of work for the committee, but to help us sort of steer the recruitment process for Ttac to make sure that we are meeting some of the city's objectives around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I think we have an opportunity to set an example for the other boards and commissions at the city with this work. So I'm pretty excited about it. And it might mean that it could mean that our bylaws change. It doesn't necessarily mean that, but it could mean that, and that's fine if that's an outcome. Any questions here?
I think just for the committee members to look at this and consider, and if any of you have an interest in kind of working on this or supporting this effort, let either Dave or myself know, and we'll kind of see how we move forward. But like he said, it'll be later in the year.
Mm-hmm. Good. Okay. And then the last slide I have here is just, we want to make sure that we're saving and allocating some time for our ongoing work. And so I just put up some potential projects and initiatives that will be happening over the course of the next year, just for us to keep an eye on it. And there's a couple of these that I think Ttac could have a bigger role in as well, including potentially some subcommittee work outside of the regular meetings. So just quickly, some of the bigger projects that are happening right now. So obviously the TSP update, the Washington Square Regional Center plan update. I think Susan, who's the project manager for that, she's agreed that she could come in April to present to the group on that, kind of similar to what we did tonight with the concept planning, which is the next bullet on the slide. Parks Master Plan, again, continued engagement there. A little bit smaller of a project is, it looks like we're going to be moving forward with some community outreach around a potential striping change on 79th Avenue between Bonita and Durham. So we'll make sure you're informed of that when we get a little bit closer to that happening. It could mean the addition of bike lanes on 79th. Some of the initiatives that are coming up, so Streets for People. This is somewhere where we'll definitely need Ttac help on this one if we are looking at expanding the area that we cover with this for the upcoming season. We did a small pilot project last year that was very well received, and I think there's interest in expanding that a bit to some other areas. So more to come on that. You heard a bit about the 20-mile-per-hour posted speed initiative. So again, we'll keep you apprised of that. Safe Routes to School, happy to announce we have a new Safe Routes to School program coordinator, and we'll bring him in to do an introduction at some point this year. Red Rock Creek Trail Plan, Fano Creek Trail alignment study, And then finally, just generally our CIP and transportation budget. So again, this gets back to the point about bringing finance and engineering to present to the committee on the funding outlook. So that's my proposal. And I think, what we'll do is we'll huddle again as a smaller subcommittee and turn this into more of a calendar work program, particularly around the equity piece. So that's what I've got. Any questions? Yeah.
Dave, Joe, can we please include this with the agenda and the minutes from this meeting?
Absolutely. Yep. Okay, if there's no questions, I want to make sure we leave a little bit of time here. So I'm going to exit out of the presentation, and I think, Serge, you had an item you wanted to bring up.
Yes, that's right. Thank you, Dave. The item of concern to me is regarding closure of trails during construction work. It's probably happened to me it's happened to me 3 times I can remember within the last year or so that I've been walking along a City of Tigard trail and come across construction that prohibits a continuation of my journey. And I know it's part of the Complete Streets plan too, that the city maintains access to these trails. And so even on a temporary basis, it seems prudent to provide alternatives, or at least advance warning and a detour. And as an example, the most recent one, and maybe the most egregious, was the bike and trail that paved that connects the 2 Pathfinders. There's the Pathfinder Court to Pathfinder Way. It's about 100 yards long, and it's part of my morning route. I'm on foot, and I encountered one morning, just out of the blue, a work crew is there, and yellow ribbon is up, and you can't get through unless you walk across private property on mud or through a thicket. And I had a dog on a leash, and it was tough with no warning. And the walk around is something like half a mile or so to go back out to Walnut. And so it seems like, since this wasn't a one-off, that again, it's been about 3 of these kinds of things in the last year for me, where it greatly inconveniences the pedestrian, or if it was a cyclist, even more so, because you just absolutely you couldn't get through. But there was a walk around across the private property, the muddy private property, which is what I chose. And then after about 5 days, a pedestrian path around the project was created. But for the first 5 days, people were just traipsing through. So my question to city staff, and that I'd like maybe some Ttac to ponder, is there some sort of checklist, or why does this keep happening, that trails get closed and there's no warning signs put up, detour signs? There's just nothing. You're there, and like I said, if you're on a bike and you've come all this way, now you've got to backtrack. A warning sign up at Walnut and Pathfinder would have been nice. And so, is there a checklist, or are contractors just blowing off the workaround? And again, somebody built a walk around eventually, but it took 5 days. So I'm hoping city staff can address some of these concerns.
Thanks, Serge. Yeah, I'll just say it is one of the points that's outlined in the Complete Streets policy, is to make sure that during maintenance or construction that pathways and sidewalks are still provided, or alternate routes. Tegan, do you know what the process looks like when we're issuing permits for that kind of work, or if the city's doing the work themselves? How we make sure that there's still routes that are open, or detours?
Yeah, so anybody who's getting any kind of permit, so whether it's ourselves doing work, or if somebody's coming into our right of way, they're required to put in temporary pedestrian routing or accommodations. So they're not supposed to basically block it. The only caveat to that is if it's in a location where a facility doesn't exist, then they don't have to create one. So if it's on a street that doesn't have a sidewalk and they're doing road work, then they don't have to create a pedestrian path because there wasn't technically one to begin with. But if they're in a spot that has a sidewalk or a pedestrian crossing and they close it for construction, then they are required or should be required to put a temporary crossing or route in place.
And what do we do if, if there's a situation where they're not abiding by that, or how does staff find out about that, and how do we manage it?
So we have inspectors that are out and about looking at, projects that are being done, but they can't be everywhere at once. And, sometimes what will happen is that, when they're out there, everything's fine. And then as work progresses, things change, or, there's a different crew out there the next day. So sometimes we're not aware that there's a compliance issue. So if you see a spot that you think should have pedestrian routing during construction that does not, or there's something blocked with a sign or something else, you can email me and I can forward it to the appropriate parties, or you can email Jeremy or Joe in our office, and Dave could probably provide you their contact information in the next Ttac update email that goes out, and then we can look into it. We do that frequently. We'll get a public comment, for example, that will say, hey, there's a construction sign in a bike lane, and then we'll go out and look into it and move the sign and talk to the contractors and everything.
Okay. And I was just thinking, since you mentioned Jeremy, I was thinking about the construction updates that he puts together now. I wonder if that's also a way to help communicate to the public if there's going to be a rerouting or detouring or anything like that. So maybe that's something we can talk to him about. Serge, does that help answer your question? I think it seems like there is a permit process, and we have guidelines around keeping access open, but sometimes during construction things change, or our inspectors can't be everywhere all the time.
I'm thinking through these these three instances, and in all cases, well, at least on two of them, it eventually got fixed. And I'm thinking, so it's the city of Tigard requires it, but they can't be everywhere at once. And so if I come across, and both times I was there the morning, one was at the Summer Creek crossing. I was there the morning the contractors got there, and if the problem exists, then I should probably notify Tegan. Would be a good strategy, instead of just waiting for the wheels of the bureaucracy to turn to the point where an inspector gets out there and says, "Oh my gosh, there's no pedestrian route."
Yeah, I think that's helpful. And I think also maybe one of the things I can do with Tegan is just go back and again review our permit guidelines, and just make sure that the language is clear. Make sure that we don't need any changes to what we have out there right now. But yeah, I think self-reporting is going to be really helpful, and we can make sure that everybody has the right contact information.
That'd be great. Does Richard have a question?
Yeah, I see Richard's hand up.
Yeah. I guess a comment on something to add to this conversation. So usually with these projects, it sounds like it's happening on the city trail system. And usually, isn't there some kind of pre-construction meeting with the contractor or project manager with the city assigned specifically to those projects? I'm just wondering if it can't be something, a line item on kind of the checkoff that goes to the contractor. Okay, you need to do this, this, and this, and it just needs to be highlighted on there, reinforced before the contractor even gets on site to start doing work, so they know specifically, they need to provide signage and an alternate route instead of waiting for.
Yeah, no, it is something that is specified to them from the beginning. They know
Okay.
that they're supposed to do it, and it's actually a state requirement. And it's a requirement on any of the other agencies within Oregon. So ODOT makes people do it. Washington County, other local jurisdictions. So it would be pretty difficult for them to say like, oh, we didn't know that we were supposed to do that. And we do communicate it with them up front. I think it's just that, I don't know if they get busy when they're out there, or they're, not paying attention, or something gets moved, or, somebody walks by and shifts a sign, or what have you. But, normally they wouldn't get a permit unless they had a plan that says this is how we're going to accommodate it. And so it's just a matter of, are they following the approved plan?
Is there any kind of like language in there that says they need to put signage up like a week before or 3 days before they're actually closing the trail or starting work?
I would have to check on that. I think so I think a trail system is going to be different from, like the public right of way where like there's a sidewalk that's being closed, and then the diverted path is going to be like crossing the street, or they created another parallel pedestrian walkway, because a trail, you have to completely reroute your trip. So normally when we do that, for example, for like vehicles on the roadway, there is advanced signage letting people know that it's coming. But to be honest, I haven't personally worked on a trail project where that needed to be done yet. So I am not sure, but I think we could check on that and get back to you.
Okay, thanks.
All right, looks like our time has been well spent. It's a very good meeting. Thank you, everybody, for participating and sharing your thoughts and learning all of this stuff. Our next meeting will be March 3rd. And if you have any other questions, get a hold of myself or Dave. So thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Good night.